What you're seeing is actual surveillance footage. The guy you're looking at on the screen right now? That's Brian Walshe. He's wandering the aisles of a hardware store. Here he is again. And again. In some of these clips, he actually looks pretty upbeat. In others, he's dead serious, maybe even a little spooked. If you bumped into him while picking up supplies, you wouldn't look twice. He just seems like a completely normal guy running errands. But what if I told you that underneath his clothes, he's wearing a police-issued GPS ankle monitor, just killing time on house arrest before heading to federal prison for fraud? What if I told you that a few months prior, Brian found out his wife was having a secret affair with a coworker and she was actively planning to start a brand new life without him? What if I told you that he spent 4 days straight bouncing between different hardware stores, but he wasn't doing any home renovations? Add to that, there's surveillance footage of him driving around in the dead of night, casually heaving massively heavy trash bags into random dumpsters across town. Just a few days before all of this footage was taken, Brian was ringing in the 2023 New Year with his wife Anna and a family friend in their gorgeous, cozy home. But after that night, nobody ever saw Anna again. And to understand how that perfect holiday turned into a nightmare, we have to look behind the facade and see who Brian and Anna Walshe really were. Anna built her reality from the ground up. Escaping a fractured Serbia, she landed in the US back in 2005. She was 22, broke, but incredibly driven. Her first gig was cleaning hotel rooms, but through sheer willpower over the next decade and a half, she climbed into the upper echelon of a massive real estate corporation. She was a self-made powerhouse. Then look at the man she married. Brian was raised in the lap of luxury in a high-end Boston suburb. He portrayed himself as a sophisticated, wealthy art connoisseur, making them look like a picture-perfect power couple. But in reality, his success was a complete mirage. A couple of years prior, the FBI took him down in a sting operation. His crime? Peddling knockoff Andy Warhol art for 80 grand. He caught a federal fraud charge and was handed a 3-year prison stint. So, when you picture that festive New Year's Eve gathering with the champagne and the resolutions, keep this in mind. Brian was legally confined to that house. He was rocking a court-mandated ankle monitor while waiting to serve his time. But here is the kicker. The device wasn't tracking his exact coordinates on a digital map. It was a basic radio frequency tether that only flagged the cops if he broke his perimeter. And since Brian was a professional manipulator, he constantly finessed the system. He'd submit paperwork for pre-approved errands, creating little pockets of unmonitored time where he could leave the house completely unchecked. You can imagine the kind of psychological toll this living situation took on their marriage. Anna was the sole provider. Her schedule was a grind, spending her weekdays down in Washington, D.C., working a high-stress corporate job, and then flying back to Massachusetts on the weekends to take care of 3 little boys. And the whole time, she had the massive dark cloud of Brian's upcoming prison sentence hanging over her head. By late 2022, Anna was completely exhausted, and she began quietly looking for a way out. While working down in D.C., she formed a connection with a wealthy real estate broker named William Fastow. What started as networking evolved into a very serious secret romance. They were actively planning a future together, even mapping out a romantic trip to Ireland. Anna wanted to officially end her marriage and take her kids with her, but she was terrified of how Brian would react. So, she kept it completely buried. But Brian wasn't stupid. Stuck at home on house arrest with nothing but time on his hands, his paranoia went into overdrive. He became incredibly suspicious and started playing detective. On Christmas Day, while most parents were opening presents with their kids, Brian was glued to his phone. He typed a very specific search query into Google: William Fastow DC Real Estate. He then started digging into Anna's company and looking up everything he could find on William. 2 days later, on December 27th, Brian's search history took a much darker turn. He started researching the conditions of divorce and how marital assets are divided. But the cyberstalking wasn't even the craziest part. On that exact same day, December 27th, an official contract was signed with Axios Investigations to have a private detective tail Anna down in Washington, D.C. The person footing the bill? Brian's mother, Diana Walshe. When setting up the surveillance, Diana reportedly told the investigator, "I don't want my son to know about this." It might have seemed like the actions of an overbearing mother taking matters into her own hands. But whether she was acting entirely alone, or Brian was secretly pulling the strings to get hard proof of the affair, the reality was terrifying. Just days before the new year, Anna was actively being hunted by her own family. So, I want you to picture the sheer amount of psychological warfare happening inside that house. Anna is terrified, secretly planning a new life with another man. Brian is tracking her movements, calculating a divorce payout, and having her followed by a private eye, which brings us right back to the scene we opened this video with. The night of December 31st, New Year's Eve. Knowing everything that was bubbling just under the surface, it makes that fancy dinner so much more chilling. They were sitting across from each other, smiling, laughing with their friend, and drinking champagne. Anna even took a marker and wrote, "We are the authors of our lives" on the champagne box. It looked like the perfect holiday celebration. But in reality, their marriage was a ticking time bomb, and when their friend walked out the front door at 1:30 in the morning, the bomb finally went off. Fast forward to January 4th. 3 full days have passed since that New Year's Eve dinner. Anna is gone. Normally, when a mother of 3 vanishes into thin air, her partner is losing his mind. He's calling hospitals, knocking on doors, and blowing up the local police station. But Brian didn't do any of that. In fact, the local police department didn't hear a peep from him. The tip that triggered the entire investigation actually came from hundreds of miles away in Washington, D.C., when the head of security at Anna's corporate office called in a welfare check. Her coworkers were in a full-blown panic. Anna had missed work, and her usually hyperactive Instagram account had gone completely dead. It was only after Anna's boss called the house directly to demand where she was that Brian finally picked up the phone and officially reported his wife missing. When detectives sat down with Brian to get his side of the story, his demeanor was chillingly calm. He played the part of the confused, supportive husband to perfection. He spun a very specific narrative for the investigators. According to Brian, his wife's phone buzzed around 4 a.m. on New Year's Day with an urgent work emergency. He claimed she gave him a quick kiss goodbye, ordered a rideshare, and rushed off to Logan International Airport to catch a flight down to D.C. With Anna gone, Brian said he just slipped into dad mode, making breakfast for their 3 boys. Later that day, he claimed he left the house to run some errands for his mother at a CVS and a Whole Foods in a few neighboring towns. It sounded like a totally plausible, mundane sequence of events, but in a missing person case, detectives have to verify every single detail, and as soon as they started pulling the threads of Brian's story, it instantly fell apart. First, they reached out to Anna's real estate firm to ask about the sudden crisis. Her coworkers were completely baffled. There was no emergency. Nobody from the office had contacted Anna that morning. Okay, that's a massive red flag. Next, investigators subpoenaed records from Uber and Lyft to track her route to the airport. Both databases came back totally empty. Not a single car had been dispatched to the Walshe residence that morning. So, police pivoted to the airport. They cross-referenced flight manifests with JetBlue and pulled the TSA security footage from Logan Airport. Anna never purchased a ticket. She never walked through the security scanners. She never boarded a plane. It didn't take long for Brian's neat little narrative to completely disintegrate. But detectives figured they should at least verify his personal alibi. They pulled hours of surveillance video from the pharmacy and the grocery store where he claimed he was picking up items for his mom. Brian never set foot in either building. There were no receipts and no footage of him anywhere. The work crisis was a lie. The rideshare was a lie. The airport trip was a lie. And his own alibi was completely fabricated. So, if Brian Walshe wasn't out buying groceries for his mother on New Year's Day, where the hell was he? They found him on tape on January 1st, the exact same afternoon he claimed he was at home playing dad mode after his wife left for the airport. A security camera at a Lowe's hardware store in Danvers, Massachusetts, captured a man roaming the aisles. He was trying to keep a low profile, wearing a black surgical mask and thick blue rubber gloves. It was Brian. He walked up to the self-checkout register and peeled off over $450 in cash. And the items he was scanning are the stuff of nightmares. He bought mops, buckets, gallons of bleach, and chemical solvents like paint thinner. But he didn't stop at cleaning supplies. He also purchased a hatchet, a heavy-duty Tyvek hazmat suit, and a hacksaw along with extra replacement blades. The spending spree didn't end there. The following day, January 2nd, the cameras caught him at it again. This time, he was at a Home Depot located in Rockland. He shelled out another $450 in cash, loading his cart with even more buckets and mops, thick heavy-duty tarps, and over 100 pounds of baking soda. But stockpiling the supplies was only phase 1. By January 3rd, the surveillance footage shifted from suspicious to downright terrifying. Security footage from a random apartment complex captured the family's SUV pulling up next to a commercial dumpster in the dark. In the video, you can watch Brian lingering by the back of the car, rummaging through the trunk. A moment later, he steps away holding a black trash bag, casually tosses it into the bin, gets back into the driver's seat, and disappears into the night. The most chilling piece of tape, however, was recorded on January 4th. Remember, this is the very same day he was making those concerned phone calls to Anna's co-workers, officially reporting her missing and playing the role of the terrified husband. He went to yet another Lowe's, but this time, he didn't go alone. He actually brought one of his toddler sons along for the ride. He was purchasing a heavy-duty trash can. As he stood there in the store with his child, shopping for disposal equipment while his wife was supposedly lost, Brian glanced right up into the lens of the security camera. He casually adjusted his hair and smiled. At this point, detectives didn't need a confession to know exactly what they were looking at. The illusion of a missing person case was completely shattered. Brian had fabricated his entire alibi and instead spent 72 hours stockpiling chemicals, purchasing tools for a much darker purpose, and tossing mysteriously heavy bags into random dumpsters across neighboring towns. By January 8th, exactly a week after Anna was last seen, authorities finally slapped the handcuffs on Brian. They couldn't hit him with the ultimate charge just yet since there was no physical victim, so they booked him for intentionally hindering a police investigation. But getting him behind bars handed detectives the golden ticket. A judge signed off on a comprehensive search warrant for the Walshe residence. At first glance, the main floor of the home looked completely undisturbed. But the real nightmare was hiding inside the family's electronics. Tech experts seized a MacBook and, heartbreakingly, an iPad that belonged to one of his young sons. A deep dive into the browser data stopped investigators dead in their tracks. At 4:54 a.m. on New Year's Day, the exact window of time Brian insisted his wife was calling a rideshare and heading to the airport, someone was wide awake, furiously typing questions into Google. While his 3 toddlers were fast asleep down the hall, Brian was looking up things that would make your blood run cold. Here are just a few of the questions he typed into that tablet. Can you be charged with murder without a body? How long before a body starts to smell? How to stop a body from decomposing? How long does someone need to be missing to inherit? As the clock ticked over to January 2nd, the browser history became much more frantic and brutally specific. Can you throw away parts? Hacksaw best tool to dismemberment and the best ways to dispose of a body. How to clean blood from wooden floor. 10 ways to dispose of a body if you really need to. Armed with this chilling digital footprint, crime scene technicians immediately made their way down into the home's basement. Despite Brian's obvious attempts to sanitize the area with all those heavy-duty chemicals he bought, forensics easily uncovered what he tried to erase. They found bloodstains soaked into the concrete floor. There were red smears on the wooden staircase and on a structural support beam. And tucked away nearby, they recovered a badly damaged knife, its blade crusted with dried blood. The narrative was undeniable now. The police weren't hunting for a stressed-out woman who ran off to start a new life. They were looking at a horrific crime scene that took place right beneath the feet of Brian's sleeping children. The detectives knew exactly what happened in that basement. Now, they faced a terrifying race against the clock, tracking down those heavy black bags before the local garbage trucks wiped away the evidence forever. Investigators had to move fast. They painstakingly mapped out every single dumpster Brian had visited over the past few days and cross-referenced them with municipal garbage collection routes. Their frantic search led them straight to a massive refuse transfer facility in the town of Peabody. Detectives donned hazmat gear and began sifting through literal mountains of trash. After hours of grueling work, they finally spotted them. The heavy, dark garbage bags. Mixed in with the debris were very specific personal belongings: a designer Prada purse, a wallet, a COVID-19 vaccination card with Anna's name clearly stamped right on it. And sitting there amidst the trash were a pair of green hunter boots, the exact same footwear Anna had on the last time anyone saw her. But it was the hardware inside those bags that truly painted the grim picture of what happened. Investigators cataloged a hammer, heavy wire shears, a hatchet, and a hacksaw. They pulled out safety goggles and the very same Tyvek protective suit Brian had purchased on camera. They even found a pair of slippers covered in red stains, with human hair clinging to the fabric. Among the debris, detectives also pulled out a heavy area rug. It had been cut into segments and was heavily soaked in blood. Upon closer inspection, forensics found a jagged piece of metal buried deep within the fibers. Whoever was using a saw on top of that rug had applied so much force that the blade literally snapped in half and wedged itself into the material. Lab results quickly confirmed what everyone already knew. The DNA on the tools, the slippers, and the rug was a direct match to Anna Walshe. The DNA swabbed from the inside of the Tyvek suit belonged to Brian. Turning their attention back to the family's Volvo SUV, authorities found the rear seats folded completely flat, protected by a heavy plastic liner. Brian had practically bathed the interior in bleach, but chemical reagents still lit up, revealing hidden biological evidence all over the cargo area. Tucked away inside the center console, police found exactly 16 pairs of disposable gloves. The horrifying puzzle was finally put together. Brian had suited up in his own basement, committed the ultimate betrayal, and used his hardware store purchases to cover his tracks. He packed the evidence into the back of his vehicle and spent the following days discarding the mother of his 3 children into random bins like absolute garbage. And just to tie up one last loose end, investigators later pulled store surveillance footage showing Brian casually purchasing a brand new rug to replace the one he had destroyed. With the physical evidence locked down, investigators finally had the complete picture. But one glaring question remained: why? We know about the secret romance and the impending divorce, but prosecutors uncovered another massive factor that pushed Brian over the edge: money. It turns out, Anna had a life insurance portfolio totaling roughly $2.7 million, and Brian was listed as the sole beneficiary. Look at the reality he was facing at the end of 2022. His wife was secretly planning to leave him and take their 3 children to Washington, D.C. He was absolutely broke, confined to his home, and just weeks away from a potential federal prison sentence for his art fraud case. If Anna filed for divorce, Brian would be left with nothing. But if his wife suddenly vanished, he stood to inherit millions. But there is one deeply tragic reality to this story. Despite the overwhelming mountain of digital evidence, the hardware store receipts, and the DNA recovered from the transfer station, Anna's body has never been found. Authorities believe that the specific garbage bins Brian used on his midnight runs were emptied and transported to a municipal incinerator before police could intercept them. Which brings us back to that chilling 4 a.m. Google search. Brian typed, "Can you face a homicide charge without a body?" He honestly believed he had found the ultimate legal loophole. He thought that if he could just make the physical evidence disappear, the police would be powerless, and he could walk away a wealthy single father. But he was dead wrong. The digital footprint and the forensic evidence were simply too overwhelming. The justice system didn't need a physical body to prove exactly what he did in that basement. The jury saw right through his fabricated reality, officially finding Brian Walshe guilty of first-degree murder. And when the final gavel dropped, the man who thought he had committed the perfect crime was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. He will spend the absolute rest of his natural life exactly where he belongs, behind bars.